Because of the existence of magic, this world has spawned many demonic caves and demons. For the same reason, those with special powers have also awakened. They became known as the Awakened Ones. At this moment, the strongest team of Awakened Ones, called the Divine Core, arrived at the SSS rank Demon King. He was known as Belphegor, possessing the 5 elements. The guy's name is Bai Yi, and it has been 10 years since he led this team. Their mission is to protect the demonic caves under the orders of the ultimate authority, the one called God. Rushing forward, Bai Yi announced to the Divine Core that their operation was beginning. This time, they were already facing the 100th high-level demonic cave. Behind him was a L-rank assassin, Ling Yue, using the element of lightning. She obediently rushed out to fulfill the captain's order. This entire mission was labeled as an L-rank cleansing operation. Joining the battle was a mage, Han Xiaoling, best known as a L-rank cloud mage. He used the Glacial World ability. In this world, L-rank represented the highest level of difficulty. Bai Yi, shrouded in lightning, rushed straight towards the boss. He was already thinking about the fact that once they finished this mission, they would all have a short vacation waiting for them. At this point, Lucian of Support, also known as a L-rank Stellar Guide, used the Stellar Descent, Gravity Pull ability. Thanks to this, the gravitational attraction was increased. The power was increased by 200% and the speed by 100%, so the gravity increased 100-fold. With a powerful slashing strike at an incredible speed, Bai Yi easily slashed the boss, and then froze in a pompous pose despite the explosions while destroying the boss. Bai Yi is the Commander-in-Chief of the Divine Core, L-rank Nuclear Saint Warrior. The strongest awakened team easily destroyed the SSS rank Demon King with ease. Han Xiaoling stretched, kneading his back and arms. He complained that they had finished the mission too quickly, so he wasn't having much fun. Ling Yue promised to find a couple demon caves for him later so he could have fun there. Lucian, whose face was still under the hood, remarked that this was a top-notch mission that required their entire unit. He asked the guy if he thought it was somehow too easy. Wiping his sword from the remains of the Demon King with a cloth, Bai Yi remembered that the intelligence claimed that it was a special Demon King with 5 elements and a hidden skill. As if preventing him from thinking, at this moment, Ling Yue embraced him. Getting too close to him, causing his face to turn red, she asked if he would treat them to something before they went on vacation. She even whispered to him that they could go out just the 2 of them. However, grabbing her face and pulling her slightly away from him, he promised that they would all get together as usual in the holy capital. Ling Yue was disappointed that another one of her attempts to get close to the captain had been interrupted. Han Xiaoling was shocked, noting that the captain understood absolutely nothing about women. Suddenly, he asked the others if the guy had followed them. Lucian explained that the guy had said he would do the sweep, but he hadn't even fought Belphegor. The girl thought it was something ordinary, noticing that the guy was always the slowest of them. Han Xiaoling also thought that the guy was a master at slacking off. Suddenly, the masked guy they were just talking about appeared behind them. With a snap of his fingers, he announced the start of the purification operation. In the same instant, it was as if a bullet had hit Han Xiaoling's head. Bai Yi, Ling Yue, and Lucian were shocked by what had happened, for they could not have expected something like this to happen. Their friend and companion fell to the ground and did not make a single sound anymore as he died. The guy declared that this was the real mission that God had given him. At this moment, Bai Yi discovered that his body was frozen and he could not move. The guy informed the perplexed captain that all his breakfast for the past month had been with paralyzing powder. The guy then used a divine skill, Forbidden Vines. With his ability, he began to entangle them without giving them a chance to move. He loudly announced that to eliminate the strongest of them, he needed absolute training. His ability temporarily rendered the victim unconscious and removed all defenses from the victim. Desperately trying to resist, Bai Yi thought that the guy had lost his mind. Experiencing monstrous pain, Ling Yue also didn't understand what the guy was even doing. However, the masked guy announced that it was all God's orders. The L-rank purification operation meant to purify them. In the next instant, Ling Yue and Lucian died right in front of Bai Yi's eyes. By this point, Bai Yi was the only one who was still alive and desperately fighting back. He didn't understand why it was necessary to destroy them. After all, the divine core had never crossed the line. He couldn't understand what other god had ordered the guy to do this, and by what right. Bai Yi felt incredibly angry as he shouted out his last words. He didn't understand what right they had to do this to them. Standing in front of him, the guy calling him an old friend remarked that he was still so naive. Plunging his hand into his stomach, the guy explained that when a god kills you, he doesn't need a reason to do it. Being on the verge of death, Bai Yi was still trying to find out why the guy did that. After all, they were comrades. They had been together for 10 years, so they could be considered a family. The guy was surprised when he heard the words comrades and family. He was puzzled why Bai Yi didn't understand why Bai Yi was chosen. But still, the fellow explained that since their first meeting, the god had been moving these figures, and they had always been nothing but pathetic pawns. The guy admitted that he was incredibly sick of having to play this role for so long, because it took so long to gain their trust. After these words and his mental discharge in talking to Bai Yi, Guy finally finished what he had started and cut Bai Yi's life short. May 22, 2125. All the participants were confirmed dead, and the L-rank mopping up operation was successfully completed. The guy was happy, for he could finally now go on a little vacation. Bai Yi's life was ended on such a sad note. However, when he was in total darkness, he suddenly heard someone offering him a deal. When he opened his eyes, he didn't realize where he was, and his whole body was wrapped in chains. Suddenly, a man in a strict suit appeared in front of him and said hello to him. Turning around at the sound of the man's voice, Bai Yi was completely shocked. He even wondered if it was really Belphegor standing before him. He was curious as to why the Demon King was still alive. Belphegor was amazed that the guy was so naive that an SSS-rank Demon King would die so easily. He explained that this was all the domain of his soul. The entire Nye realm is his life force. Looking at the perplexed guy, he decided that enough idle chatter and it was time to get down to business. Belphegor noted that the guy's hatred matched his, so he decided to make a deal with the guy. The Demon King pointed out that his hidden skill was called life regression. He could send the guy to the distant past, giving the guy a chance to change everything. Belphegor, grinning, asked if Bai Yi was interested in his offer. Hearing his proposal, Bai Yi thought about his life. He remembered how many amazing and joyful moments Ling Yue, Han Xiaoli and Lucian had experienced with him. In the same instant, his anger began to grow at an incredible speed when he remembered how the guy had destroyed everyone he cared about. The chains restraining Bai Yi were instantly broken, and he declared that he would definitely kill the traitor. He wasn't going to stop at just that. In fact, after the guy, he was going to destroy the so-called gods who sat on their thrones. Belphegor was ecstatic about it. Everything happened as he expected, and Bai Yi agreed to his proposal. In order for the guy to successfully complete his task, Belphegor decided to give him a small gift. He called this gift a welcome bonus. Despite his anger, Bai Yi asked why Belphegor decided to make a deal with him and what the price of this deal was. However, Belphegor only smiled when he heard the guy's words. Darkness suddenly fell, and someone had already tiredly shouted out Bai Yi's name. Bai Yi slowly opened his eyes and tried to realize what was even happening. A woman was shouting at Bai Yi and told him to get up immediately. It was now the 2105th year, Holy Nation Protectorate, J State, Awakened Academy, High School Division. Suddenly his thoughts began to come together and his mind began to clear. The guy was amazed that he had indeed traveled back in time. He began to examine his hands as he realized that he had returned to a time when he had not yet awakened. The woman was angry. She was resentful of Bai Yi sleeping through normal classes, but today was a special day. She resented the guy sleeping and sniffling before the awakening ceremony. She told the guy to get up immediately and head to the back of the classroom. Looking up, Bai Yi was amazed that Teacher Huang appeared in front of him. He was still trying to realize what had even happened to him, and if he had really returned to his school days. Getting up from his seat, the guy went to the back of the classroom. Bai Yi was amazed that he had actually been reborn. He thought about Belphegor's ability and was amazed at how incredible it was. As he walked past the other students, he continued to ponder about it. The guy was amazed. After all, he hadn't seen some of his classmates in almost 20 years. After Bai Yi stood at the back of the class, teacher Huang decided to continue the lesson. She asked everyone to listen carefully to the information she was going to tell. This was followed by a lecture from her that there were 5 elemental forces in this world: lightning, flower, cloud, nuclear, and stellar. The teacher clearly stated that each person can possess only one element. After that, she even demonstrated by herself that she had the rarest element, the cloud element. Depending on how an element connects with one's body, they divided them into 3 categories: combat, support, and special. The combinations of the 5 elements with different roles created many professions. The teacher told her students that their school's strongest guild consisted of a stellar mage, a cloud warrior, a nuclear bard, and a lightning assassin. She realized that all of her students had already surpassed ordinary people, awakening potential unlike the millions of people who were unlucky, and that they had been praised since childhood, for that was when their stellar hour had come. But she noted that today was their most important day. There were nearly 100 known awakened professions. These professions were divided in quality from lowest to highest: green, blue, red, and gold. Each of the disciples were only given one chance to awaken. She announced clearly that each student's profession would be determined this afternoon, and that this profession would denote their future status in this world. After class, the guy walked around the school, feeling a strong sense of nostalgia. It was in this school that he first awakened. At that moment, a guy with glasses fell in front of him. However, the guy with glasses didn't fall down by himself, but was helped. As usual, bullies must appear in any schools. The main bully called the guy with glasses a useless piece of trash that only relies on artificial awakening. He was unhappy that such a guy was blocking his path. Stepping on his arm with his foot, the bully wondered if the guy thought he was cool just because he was awakened. He believed that to the awakened rare red-ranked ones, all others would just be insects. The bully was Hong Changsheng, a E-rank assassin, stellar elemental, origin unknown. The guy with glasses immediately started apologizing to Hong Changsheng and gave him some money as an apology. Bai Yi remembered this bully. He remembered that even in his past life, Hong Changsheng was always getting into fights. Bai Yi assumed that Hong Changsheng's testosterone was just skyrocketing, and so he was always looking for trouble. At this moment, teacher Huang appeared. She told Hong Changsheng to stop immediately. She was indignant, pointing out that they were in school, not in a robbery. Hong Changsheng cheerfully pointed out that it was actually the guy with glasses who had crashed into him. Waving the money taken from the guy with glasses in front of the teacher, Hong Changsheng thought that it was only fair to treat his guys to a bubble tea. However, Hong Changsheng actually resented the woman playing the heroine. He felt that if the woman wasn't so pretty, he would have gotten her fired a long time ago. At the end, Hong Changsheng decided to back down this time, obeying the teacher. The first thing the teacher did was to ask if the guy with glasses was all right. However, at this moment, Bai Yi stood in the way of Hong Changsheng and his guys. Hong Changsheng was angered that the guy was staring at him like that, so he grabbed his shoulder and pushed him aside. He believed that he would come back later to laugh at these weaklings. The guy with the glasses was practically crying by now, sitting next to the teacher. He knew very well what the consequences would be for him soon. The teacher was trying to convince him that the incident was not his fault. Bai Yi remembered that teacher Huang was always strict on the outside, but kind on the inside. She was the one who had helped him after the awakening. Suddenly, someone called out to the teacher, noting that it was her class's turn to go to the awakening hall. Teacher Huang was giving them final instructions before the most important stage in their lives. She asked everyone to remember that during the awakening, they must remain completely calm to avoid injury. There were 2 ways of awakening in this world. The first way was a natural awakening like Hong Changsheng's. The first way usually happened to people with strong bodies and natural gift. The first way of awakening happens automatically at times when one feels strong emotions. The second way of awakening is through the awakening hall. The awakening chamber is the embodiment of the wisdom of countless scholars. Inside the chamber, emotions and adrenaline are highly stimulated, provoking a possible awakening. The teacher and the other students watched as one of the students successfully completed the awakening, Mystic Mage School. The guy was rejoicing that he had gotten a profession of blue quality. The teacher approached him and advised him to now go upstairs and get a good rest. Since every person is awakened randomly only once, therefore the process of awakening is considered as the only reset in life. At this moment, the teacher announced that Bai Yi's awakening process was next. She reprimanded him again, telling him to gather his thoughts immediately. She wanted the guy to not be lazy in her lessons anymore. The guy was well aware that he couldn't just laze around now. In his past life, he had awakened as an E-rank nuclear warrior. It was a green quality profession. Because of this, he was constantly bullied. Only when he reached S rank did he manage to awaken the rarest type. Bai Yi understood that he had to have a nuclear element, but he still didn't fully understand what he would become this time. Suddenly, the system gave an error as it originally detected 5 elements. The guy abruptly staggered back with a sharp pain. He couldn't understand what was happening or why he had such a high fever inside. Suddenly, the system announced that the Infinite Awakening system had been activated. The system informed that since a guy's body contained 5 types of elements, the guy could choose any element and any profession as his initial career. Subsequently, when a certain element accumulated enough energy, then the guy would be able to get a new random profession for that element and improve the existing profession. The guy tried to get answers from the system, completely unaware of what the system's words meant. He tried to understand the words to mean that maybe he could not only choose the awakened element and profession, but also get new professions in the future. Many combinations of professions lit up in his mind. He could get green, blue, red, gold, all levels of rarity. In theory, he could even now get a special quality profession. The system agreed with his conclusions, but noted that the guy could only choose an initial profession, and all subsequent professions would be given out randomly. Belphegor intervened at that moment, wanting to push the guy once more. Now the guy had a better understanding of where his choices had led him. After all, he now had the ability of endless awakenings. The system informed him that once he chose his original profession, all elemental scales would be reset, so the system asked the guy to choose wisely. The other disciples were extremely dissatisfied, not understanding why the guy was stuck and still not coming out. At this moment, Bai Yi finally came out of the awakening hall. The teacher immediately ran up to him, wondering what profession the guy had awakened to. Bai Yi immediately informed her that he had to disappoint her. He confessed that he had awakened a nuclear warrior profession of the worst green quality. The teacher's gaze changed greatly. She tried not to express it, but she was obviously very disappointed, realizing that the guy was going to have a very hard time in life. The teacher instantly became cheerful, trying to convince the guy that his life would not end here, because even among the green quality there are outstanding people. Therefore, the teacher asked the guy not to give up, believing that this world will not leave the guy aside. Bai Yi was even a little surprised. He stated that the teacher didn't need to comfort him. However, the teacher was a good person, so she admitted that she understood exactly how awful the guy felt. She asked him to rest, as the awakening must have exhausted him. At this moment, Hong Changsheng came over, who laughed at the teacher's words of encouragement to the guy. It was incredibly funny for him to hear that if you work hard, the world won't let you down. And who wouldn't be amused by such blatant nonsense, which was far from reality? He remembered that the teacher was quite capable. Therefore, he couldn't understand how a qualified teacher could speak such useless and toxic positivity. Hong Changsheng continued to laugh, noting that the teacher herself was well aware that reality was not like this at all. He added that the green quality means that you are at rock bottom. Hong Changsheng was well aware that this was the world and that gods choose people, and gods only choose the strong ones, and the weak ones are needed for humiliation. Bai Yi didn't like his words about the gods deciding everything in his life. The teacher was extremely displeased with his words. She inquired as to why he had reappeared here. Hong Changsheng continued to laugh, noting that those with green quality could now only sit on the back. He wondered if the guy knew why this was the case. He didn't see anything strange about it, as this was the way their society was structured. If there is no power or connections, you have no future. Always in the background are those who are forgotten by justice. The strong got the best resources and got stronger and stronger. From the moment of awakening and receiving the green quality, one's fate is already decided. They could only be low-level laborers among the awakened. Therefore, Hong Changsheng sincerely didn't understand what nonsense the teacher was saying about hard work. He couldn't believe that green quality and genius were in any way compatible at all. Besides, he thought that the teacher herself didn't believe in her own words. Hong Changsheng was well aware that all of this was like a birth, which meant that the fate of those who obtained the green quality was predetermined, and their awakened academy was just a reflection of this entire hierarchy. Moving closer to the teacher, he asked if she could refute what he said. He reminded the teacher that she had a blue-quality profession, but she was still a useless person who only taught school and ate in public canteens. Looking at the guy with disdain, Hong Changsheng said that those with green-quality profession should immediately go home and not waste the resources of the state. He was about to pour his drink over the guy's head, but Bai Yi intercepted his plastic cup and pushed it down, causing all the drink from the cup to splash right into Hong Changsheng's face. Hong Changsheng was furious, not realizing what the guy was even doing. Without a single change in his face, Bai Yi declared that he was fed up with his chatter. Hong Changsheng was furious and wasn't going to let the guy get away with such misbehavior. He rushed to attack the guy. Bai Yi noticed that Hong Changsheng was using the Stellar Spike Strike, which was the basic attack of a stellar assassin. This ability increased the power of the attack. In response to a similar attack from Hong Changsheng, Bai Yi used block. The professions of red quality and green quality clashed. Hong Changsheng was extremely satisfied with his attack. But then he couldn't understand what was even happening when Bai Yi used parry and pushed Hong Changsheng away from him. The force when parrying was quite powerful as Hong Changsheng flew off a considerable distance. An incredible silence hung in the air. The injured Hong Changsheng, who was lying on the ground, looked at the guy and couldn't understand what had just happened. The other students also opened their mouths in complete shock. They couldn't understand what had even happened. Their reactions were not surprising, since a guy with a green quality profession was able to deal with a guy with a red quality profession so easily. They were trying to figure out what the catch was. However, there was no catch, as Bai Yi admitted that he had chosen this profession himself, as he was simply used to this profession. Green profession, nuclear warrior with a basic lightsaber. Attack, +20, evasion, +20. Hong Changsheng meanwhile got up from the ground. He continued to act laughing, thinking that the guy was just lucky and that the guy had just dodged once. His pride was hurt. He then considered himself a rare awakened with a red quality profession. He couldn't even believe that someone would equal him with the kind of trash that the guy in front of him was. However, the teacher was well aware that there was no way everything that had just happened was an accident. The woman was shocked that the guy was using a top-notch movement skill only available to a warrior: parrying. She saw that the guy was perfectly able to use this skill to block the damage at the moment you get hit the hardest. And on top of that, the guy with an impossible reaction time of 0.09 of a second was able to reflect physical damage to the opponent. She was well aware that if the block was performed in time, 100% of the damage could be cancelled out. With a reactivation with 0.09 of a second, there was a chance to reflect all the physical damage back to the opponent. The woman was completely shocked, as this was a technique her teacher couldn't master even in 10 years of hard training. And the guy in front of her on the first day of awakening with no real combat experience was able to do it. Hong Changsheng went into serious mode. He inquired if the guy was now ready to die. Red profession, Astro Assassin with bayonet. Attack, +30, speed, +30. Hong Changsheng was enraged. He promised to make the guy crawl in front of him in front of everyone. Bai Yi knew exactly what he was doing. He had his reasons for choosing this profession that seemed incredibly weak. He decided to go against the established rule. He was going to show everyone that judging a person's future and life by birth was a serious mistake that everyone would only realize after many years. The system reported that to block, one must use a weapon to stop the damage, blocking over 50 damage depending on time. What happens next for the guy and his fun time at school? Murderous auras began to emanate from both guys. The students wanted to see them fight as soon as possible, although they couldn't believe that this was even happening in front of their eyes. However, one of the students pointed out that using awakened powers for duels was strictly forbidden in school. Besides, there were so many people watching them. They were well aware that Hong Changsheng's father is a high-ranking official and his uncle is the dean. But Bai Yi's family is penniless and has no connections. The guy with glasses, who had been beaten up by Hong Changsheng earlier, quickly realized that if Bai Yi fought with Hong Changsheng, Bai Yi would be expelled immediately. Running up to the teacher, he asked what they should do in this situation. Taking a deep exhale, the teacher intervened in their conflict. She stated that everyone had just awakened, and that Hong Changsheng and Bai Yi might even become comrades in future battles. Therefore, she asked them to take their time. However, Hong Changsheng was unwilling to stop, believing that the teacher was mocking him. He pointed out to her that trash like Bai Yi had provoked him in front of everyone, and now he should just stop and make things stop. Hong Changsheng pointed out that all her entreaties were useless, even if the guy kneeled down and begged for forgiveness. He promised to make the guy understand the difference between a chosen one and a loser. Hong Changsheng couldn't wait to show the insurmountable gap that was between them. As he said all this, he burst out laughing. The teacher was well aware that Hong Changsheng was right and that the reason for the huge difference was because of the difference in characteristic bonuses. Bai Yi, Level 1 E rank. Profession, Nuclear Warrior. Characteristics, 100% bonus. Strength, 53. Speed, 41. Stamina, 61. Luck, 26. Elemental Strength, 8. Spirit, 11. Skills, Block, Swiftness. The attribute bonus of the green profession was 100%, meaning no change. While a profession of blue quality profession, like the teacher, gets a 150% attribute bonus. And on the other hand, a red quality profession receives a bonus of 200%. Hong Changsheng, Level 1 E rank. Profession, Stellar Assassin. Strength, 62 times 2. Speed, 75 times 2. Endurance, 22 times 2. Luck, 21 times 2. Elemental Strength, 10 times 2. Spirit, 10 times 2. Skills, Backstabbing, Ferocity. The teacher was well aware that at the moment of awakening, the characteristics of the red quality were twice that of the green quality. Therefore, she believed that the power gap between the two would never be bridged. The guy with glasses also realized that it was all over for Bai Yi. He knew that whether it was strength or origin, Bai Yi would be completely crushed by his opponent. He didn't understand why the guy would go after someone so much stronger than him. What he did understand was that people like Hong Changsheng were disgusting. But to survive in society, one had to learn to avoid scum. And when avoiding scum didn't work, his plan was to learn how to swallow humiliation. The guy with glasses understood the current world order and that only those who know how to bend and yield can save themselves, and that direct confrontation is the stupidest choice. The guy with glasses, learned from bitter experience, predicted that Bai Yi would be even more humiliated. The teacher helplessly shouted at the last moment for Bai Yi to dodge. She couldn't tell if the guy would block the attack again. She knew very well that the parrying skill consumed a huge amount of stamina. The woman saw that Hong Changsheng's attack was too strong and his speed was incredibly fast. The teacher would have wanted to save her student, but she was running out of time, realizing that it was over and the guy wouldn't be able to block Hong Changsheng's attack. Hong Changsheng was also excited to see how the guy would dodge his attack. However, Bai Yi only grinned at him, not understanding why he needed to dodge. He was using the swiftness skill. This skill temporarily increased speed by more than 50%. The increase depended on reaction and skill. And then he used the instant flash skill. When the user reaches 100% of the swiftness skill, he can activate the flash effect, so he passes through the obstacles ahead. Hong Changsheng didn't realize how the guy managed to be at his back. However, at this moment, he noticed that Bai Yi had even managed to seriously damage him in the meantime. Lying on the ground, he couldn't believe that he had lost to some trash. He continued to believe that trash belonged in a garbage dump, but he couldn't explain how Bai Yi had defeated him. The rest of the students were in shock, trying to ask the others if any of them had seen what had even happened. The students couldn't understand, and no one could see what had happened. They noticed that Hong Changsheng had just taken a tumble. They even thought that Hong Changsheng must have just slipped. After all, there was no way a guy with a green quality profession could have overpowered him. Even the guy with glasses, who was the smartest to dodge the scum, could no longer contain his laughter. He didn't understand how Hong Changsheng could fall so easily. The teacher had a frightened expression on her face, and she admitted that she too didn't see what had even happened. The girl standing behind them, with pink hair and a short haircut, was also thinking about what had just appeared before her eyes. She noticed that the moment Hong Changsheng attacked, the guy had reactivated his unique warrior skill, swiftness. And she also noticed that it was an improved form of the swiftness skill, instantaneous flash. However, she was unable to examine what Bai Yi had done to wound his opponent. What surprised her the most was the ease with which the guy dispatched his opponent with just one move. The girl was amazed that the guy had not only mastered the highest level of basic warrior skills, but also applied them flawlessly in battle. The girl was the head of the class, Qi Yin. The other students who witnessed the fight didn't understand at all what had just happened to Hong Changsheng. They looked at the guy with suspicion, and Qi Yin noted how cunning the guy was, that even at the moment of attack, he had thought about how not to break the school rules in public. She was very curious about what had happened to Bai Yi recently. Examining his characteristics, the guy was glad that everything happened just as he thought it would. Fighting against a certain profession gave him experience, and defeating an enemy of a certain element gave him points of that element. However, he felt that 50 points was too few. Therefore, he began to think about starting to mop up the dungeons as soon as possible. He chose the nuclear warrior profession because when advancing in the profession, a nuclear warrior gains unique characteristics and extremely powerful skills that surpass other professions. Therefore, he needed to start pumping and evolving faster than before as soon as possible. Hong Changsheng looked after the guy, and holding his wounded throat, he told the guy not to even think of leaving him so easily. Hong Changsheng was going to kill the guy from behind. However, at this moment, a man appeared and told him to stop. This man was the dean of the junior division of Awakening Academy, Hong Liang. He felt that Hong Changsheng had already embarrassed himself enough, and it was time to stop. Holding onto his throat, Hong Changsheng called the dean his uncle. Hong Liang stated that everyone was most likely tired of the awakening, so they should disperse. With the dean's appearance, the rest of the Gawkers were startled and gathered to disperse. He told everyone to disperse and head home, since it was still the weekend. He also told everyone to be sure to tell their families about their awakened professions. However, at this point, he turned to Bai Yi and asked if he knew that the school was strictly forbidding. But after hearing about the house from the dean, the guy didn't listen to him anymore. Having barely been reborn, he didn't even realize it at first. Since he had gone back in time 20 years, it meant that they were still alive. After all, on the day of the awakening on May 22nd, 2105, something else important happened. Grabbing his head, the guy didn't listen to the dean at all. He didn't understand how he could forget something so important. Not listening to the dean's shouting, the guy ran home. Glaring at the teacher, the dean yelled at her to keep a better eye on his student. He wasn't going to make a big deal out of today's incident and decided to pretend that nothing happened. The teacher apologized to the disgruntled dean. Soon, in the dean's office, Hong Changsheng was standing in front of Hong Liang. He was still angry, thinking that the guy was just lucky, and otherwise he would hardly have lost to such a trash. Except that the dean thought all of his excuses were utter nonsense. Uncle asked if Hong Changsheng even realized what the guy had done to him. Without getting an answer, he explained that the moment Changsheng had attacked the guy had used a high-level skill called instantaneous flash. But the most important thing was that the moment the guy teleported, in that brief moment before Changsheng confronted him, he found the most vulnerable spot on Changsheng's body and hit so hard that he completely broke through Changsheng's defense. Dean realized that this entire series of moves was performed using only basic warrior abilities. Uncle admitted that even he, with 15 years of combat experience, would not have been able to execute such a series of attacks with such precision. The man admitted that their fight looked as ridiculous as if a maximum-level professional was playing with a child using only basic control. Therefore, the uncle immediately realized that the kid was not as simple as he seemed at first glance. At that moment, Bai Yi was desperately running home at full speed. He began to think that after his rebirth, besides revenge, he had many other things to do. At that moment, he arrived at his home, which brought back unpleasant memories. On that day, he sat helplessly, trembling with fear, while the murderer killed everyone he loved. This was something he had to stop at any cost after his rebirth, even if it meant giving his life for it. Would he be able to stop the raging murderer who had taken away his loved ones in his past life? And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.